I want to welcome to the program right now Dr. Robert Young with Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. Dr. Young, how are you, sir?
Hello again, Ken. Well, we're cold and snowy up here in the North Country.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I'm glad
we got ours yesterday.
I'm glad the phone lines are still working and you can join us.
Yeah, we're used to it. It's okay. I just but 1.5 inches in D.C. I would not want to be driving through there right now.
Right. You're looking at a 5-hour commute home. Yeah, and that's if you live, a half mile away from your house.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm glad you can be with us on the program today because I ran across this study. I think it was yesterday as I was doing, my searches online, and it's from the Annals of Epidemiology. I don't think that you and I have talked about this before. This came out October 11th of this year, so just a little more than a month ago. And I find it fascinating, Dr. Young, that, I look for these types of stories and these types of studies, and I hadn't seen any mention of this. This is from a number of physicians and PhDs, including Daniel Webster with Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins, Garen Wintemute, who is a big anti-gun researcher at UC Davis in California. And it's a look at, quote, California's comprehensive background check and misdemeanor violence prohibition policies and firearm mortality. So they looked at the, quote, unquote, universal background check laws. They looked at the domestic violence laws. And what they found, Dr. Young, I'm reading here from their highlights, these policies were not associated with changes in firearm homicides in California. Changes in firearm suicides were similar to changes in non-firearm suicides. And the null findings in California, they say, are consistent with other recent comprehensive background check evaluations. Now, that doesn't really...
How about that?
How about that? Yeah.
Wow, man. Yes. I am so grateful you brought this to my attention, Kim. I had not run across it either, and it's exactly the kind of thing I'm always looking for. I think the reason we didn't hear about it is because the media didn't pick it up, because the conclusions were precisely contrary to what these researchers and certainly the mainstream media want to publicize. They found in their study that the comprehensive background checks and prohibiting people for having misdemeanor violent crime convictions makes absolutely no difference in what was the falling suicide rate as well as firearm suicide rate. They like to think that they're different things, but we know that they really aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And they also discovered in their comparison with other states that this is the same fact in all the other states they looked at. I was a little concerned by their calling other states controls. They have done work in the past where they take a baseline of another state where they've manipulated some numbers to make it seem to them to be comparable, which is bad policy. You have to use the state you're studying as its own baseline.
Okay.
And one other concern I have is in their limitations section in the full paper, which I was able to pull up today after you told me about it, that there are a number of potentially confounding factors. Of course, there always are. But they mention that firearm homicides have been variable during their study period, which was basically 1991 through 2005. Well, that's not true. Firearm homicides progressively declined, and they still are overall. So I don't know why they would even say that. Mm. However, be that as it may, we know that these two factors, which people commonly recommend to the entire country as important to protect us from all sorts of homicide and suicide, are not factors.
Well, and that's what I think is really important here.
Good news for our side.
And not just, good news for people who oppose, these types of laws, but, again, I saw a headline yesterday about, I think it was Senator Casey in Pennsylvania says, we need these universal background checks. I saw another story today about Senator Toomey in Pennsylvania. We got to have these background checks. As you say, you look for these types of stories on a daily basis. You read these types of journals far more than I do. You hadn't heard of this study either. And note, again, what this study by anti-gun researchers said. They said that these evaluations or these results, the null findings in California, are consistent with other recent comprehensive background check evaluations. In other words, this isn't the first study to find that these quote-unquote universal background checks aren't. And they are not really doing anything to drive down violent crime, drive down suicides, drive down homicides. And again, if the media is not talking about this and the gun control groups haven't shifted their position, which is a whole other issue. I mean, if you are a quote-unquote gun safety group and you're not opposed to the Second Amendment and you get this data that says, hey, the thing that you've been pushing the hardest isn't effective, why are they still pushing that, Dr. Young?
Well, right. If they were following their own findings, they would drop these as issues, wouldn't they? But we can certainly hope to see more of this kind of findings, and particularly if the people doing this research today, whom you reasonably characterized as generally anti-gun researchers, if they're doing quality research, they will find this stuff out, because that's what we see in the criminological and economic literature, where people know how to do good research, much better than your average doc, with or without a PhD or an MPH. I hope eventually it'll generalize to common knowledge that these things are pointless. However, we are right now at a place where I think, thanks to the Democrats making some advances in Congress by taking back the House, that our big medical organizations are trying to jump on the bandwagon and push for more gun control. I'm sure you're aware of the ACP, American College of Physicians position paper that was published in Annals. I think maybe even we talked about it last week. I know that since NRA's tweet, which was a little tone deaf, I have to say, but it was the truth was in there, which is that all this is false. Since then, we at DRGO have been overrun by media wanting comments, brief comments on our part, lots of information from the proponents. And now the American College of Surgeons has just published a very similar position paper. These things take a long time to generate. They're consensus products, so it's clearly they're throwing these out right now when they think the fire is hot and they're sticking their irons in it.
Well, and again, I imagine in that surgeon's position paper, just as in the earlier position paper that you mentioned, they take the position that, we need these quote-unquote universal background checks. Right? I mean, that's one of their primary recommendations, actually.
Right. And so of other things,
absolutely. It doesn't end there, but that is certainly one of their first recommendations. And, again, if this is all about the science and it's all about the research, and the research is saying, well, this doesn't really work, why is it still being pushed? I can't help but notice, Dr. Young, that this is the issue that polls best for gun control advocates. And if you're looking for that PR victory, if you're looking to be able to say, look, we defeated the gun lobby and we got this through, you would probably want to start with the issue that polls the best for you, perhaps even if you have the understanding that it doesn't really do much to make anybody safer.
Well, possibly because of that, because if they get that through and they find out it doesn't change anything, then the next thing is going to be, we will have to do more, won't we? People are agreeable to this idea because they think, well, I'm fine, I'll pass, it doesn't make any difference. But it's just one more step towards the government having to give you permission to exercise your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, which the government may not infringe. So it's bad on the face of it, based on our constitutional protections of our natural rights, and we can't let that happen. On top of it now, it's beyond impractical, it's pointless, and we have to publicize that fact.
Dr. Robert Young with Dr.
More. We already have been. We knew that. But now we have some more data to publicize.
Absolutely. And, we might have to point out that this is data that if it had said something else, if this study had come out the other way and they had been able to show, look, we saw a 10% reduction in gun-related homicides, I imagine that story would have gotten an awful lot of headlines. And I think it's worth pointing out. Maybe we have to, remind the media in the press, hey, you have to report the stuff that you don't like too. Dr. Robert Young, as always, sorry, appreciate you joining us on the program. Hope that you all weather the storm, and look forward to talking again very soon.
Okay, Cam, you be careful down there.
We sure will.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Robert Young with Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership with us here on the program.